Welcome on this beautiful spring afternoon. And tonight, this afternoon, we have the pleasure of having Mike Wankum, who is the meteorologist on Channel 56 on the 10 o'clock news, present our Ocean is Alive lecture this evening. And if you watch the early news at 10 o'clock, you'll know Mike has quite a colorful weather forecast each night, which is highlighted by a weather quiz. And on the handout you received on the way in, there is a weather quiz on the back. I'm sure Mike will help you solve some of the questions. But one note I would like to mention, and when the handout was put together for today's lecture, we noted that Mike has received 8 Emmy Awards for his weather forecast, his meteorology, and since this was printed, he has received a 9th. So yesterday he was awarded
Thank you.
a 9th Emmy Award from the New England chapter of the National Television Academy of Arts and Sciences for being the best weathercaster. So no further introduction is needed. Mike?
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's a beautiful day today. I've been actually walking around town all day today, and we've been taking some pictures. So Thursday night, we're actually going to put a little story on about some of the things that we've seen and the institution and things. So it's been really fabulous. What I'd like to do here today is to kind of have a little bit of things that I want to talk about. We're going to do a little quiz. We'll talk a little bit about the weather. We'll talk a little bit about what's going behind. But the other thing I want to make sure we leave some time at the end is so we have a chance to talk and have questions. Because very rarely do you get a chance to talk back at the TV. I know every once in a while you're yelling at the sportscaster all the time, but this is your chance to talk back at TV and say, here's what I'd like to know, or why does that happen, or how does that work? I'd like to know how that works. So I want to make sure that we leave some time for that. So we make it fun. So we want to make sure that the young ones get involved, the less young ones get involved. So we're going to try to have some fun here today and just see what's going on. One thing you should probably know who your speaker is and what my background is and things. I've been with WLVI for the last 11 years. Prior to that, I worked in Richmond, Virginia for 3 years. My daughter was born down there. She claims she's a Southern belle. Sometimes she acts like it too, but then that's what 10-year-olds do. So, and before that, I grew up in Iowa, and my background is actually in chasing tornadoes. That's what I used to do. So we were talking about famous movies that we didn't particularly care for. One of those happened to be on TV the other night, which was Twister. And I had several friends who were in the film Twister. And I just had to watch it because it's just so bad. It captures the excitement of the chase. Meteorologically, it's really kind of trashy. But from the stance of just sheer excitement, it's kind of fun to see. But I have several friends who are in there, and they have to say these things that are just goofy to me. And I was actually at the premiere of the film when they opened it in Boston. They said, "Would you come and open up the film?" And I said, "Oh, that'd be great." So I sat there, and I didn't realize one of my other friends was in there. And he stands in the middle of this movie, and he gives this very serious line. It's like, "This is the mother of all storms," or something, something like that. And I just broke up laughing in the middle of the theater. Everybody else is sitting there going, "Oh, this is a tense moment." And I'm laughing because I just can't believe he said that first off, and then to see him up there. So it's quite interesting in our backgrounds and what we do. One of the things that I'm able to do at WLVI is that I'm able to kind of do a bunch of different things. So I have an opportunity to go out and do different stories. I get a chance to do weather. I get a chance to travel and do some really kind of fun things. So hopefully I'll be able to bring some of those stories into as well. But, some of you younger people, right? You were in school today? Did you have school today? This is just continuation of school now, okay? Yeah. We have tests today, all right? This is test day. You have your number 2 pencil sharpened? No, that's okay. We don't need pencils on this one. One of the things I always like to do is to have people prepared. Be prepared. What can we get ready for? What can we do? There's so many things out there that we think, oh, I'm supposed to do that. I forgot what I'm supposed to do. So hopefully we'll touch on some of that today. But first things first, it's time for tonight's Wankum's Weather Quiz. Roll the tape. Okay, since 1899, how many Category 5 hurricanes have hit the United States? All right, first I need to explain what's a Category 5. Category 5 is the big one, okay? The big one. Who's the meanest person you can think of? Meanest person, what do you think? The devil. Well, okay, that's pretty mean, okay? We'll give him a 6 and a Category 5 as one less underneath of it, okay? So this is, Category 5 is like the big hurricane. It's the monster, okay? They don't happen very often. They're pretty rare, thankfully, okay? But they are the big ones. So since 1899, past 105 years, how many Category 5 hurricanes have hit the United States? 2, 3, 4, or 5? How many think 2? How many think 3? How many think 4? How many think 5? Oh, boy, some people really are on a mode of destruction here. Well, the correct answer is actually 3. Now, for those of you who said 2, I'm going to give you extra points. I'm going to give you a few points anyway. Not extra points. We'll give you a few points. The reason is, okay, Category 5 hurricanes that have hit the United States since 1899. First, we had the 1935 Florida Key Storm. Now, it doesn't have a name because we didn't do names then. We just said it's the 1935 Florida Key Storm. Then we had Hurricane Camille. Some of you may remember it, 1969, Louisiana, Alabama. It was a real mess, okay? The other one, the third one, was not a third one until just a little recently. In 1992, we had Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida. You may remember that one. Well, it was a Category 4. We said it was a Category 4. It was a Category 4 for how many years? And then in 2001, it became a Category 5. Yes?
How do you measure how do you monitor the severity of the hurricanes? The damage that it does?
Yes. Well, how it's based upon is the Saffir-Simpson scale. And what we do is we actually go in and see how a structure was damaged. And what happened was we looked at our wind instruments, which, by the way, half of them got blown off the buildings when this thing came in. So when Andrew came in, in fact, Coral Gables, which is the National Hurricane Center, right dead center on this hurricane. So, I mean, they lost their weather instruments right away. And they had to evacuate it, actually. But what happened was we said, okay, our wind instruments said it was this, and Category 5's up here. The structural engineers kept coming back saying, listen, we got too much damage here. This was not a 4. And they lobbied for how many years? Finally, 2001, 9 years after the event, they said, you're right, it wasn't a 4, it's a 5. So that's why those of you who said 2, you were right up until a couple of years ago. Now, those of you who said 3, you are now correct as well. So that was how that changed. I have to remember which way to push the buttons here. No, 38 was only a 4. Yes. Uh-oh. We've already got dissent. I can see that already. Hold on. I know what you're thinking because I thought that as well too. But based on the structural damage and things, no, it only goes as a 4. So I know, bummer. Now you could probably go back and try to lobby if you'd like to because the structural engineers did, And then I have to change my whole quiz because I don't have that as a question option. So, all right, on to our next question. Roll the tape there. What did we do? There we go. Time for tonight's Wankum's weather quiz. How often does a major, meaning Category 5 hurricane, hit New England? Okay? How often should? If you went back and you looked at all the records from, say, 1600 on, okay? 1600 on, how often should we get one? Once every 10 years? Let me think that. Once every 100 years? Once every 50 years? Once every 1,000 years? There's some people who are really being optimistic. We'll wait 1,000 years before we get one of those. Well, the correct answer is, and this is why you were asking about that hurricane is so important. The correct answer is actually C. We are long, long overdue for Category 5 in New England. Really are. Now, the other thing too is, remember I said 1899 was the point that we used? We've had hurricanes, probably Category 5s. In fact, we're almost certain we have had Category 5s before that time. But we sort of consider 1899 the era of modern weather forecasting. I know there are some of you who still think that forecasting is kind of, Ouija boards and crystal balls and things like that. But we consider, we consider the modern era of forecasting to be 1899 and beyond. So that's really when the National Weather Service got going. Actually, it was in the 1870s, but about 1899. So that's why I say that. But I want to point this out because Category 5s, we've only had a few of them hit the United States in the last 100 years. And New England should be getting more of these than what we have. And we haven't gotten them for a while. And that's probably one of the biggest problems that we have because the ones we've gotten so far, with the exception of the 1938 one, is that we have not had any big hurricanes around here. And so people kind of get lulled into thinking, well, it's okay. Now, the last big one that we had was Hurricane Bob. Hurricane Bob was back in 1991, Category 2. Okay, remember it was just a Category 2. Anybody here remember Bob? Oh yeah, you should remember it was very close to you. I have a little bit of a video here. I'll show you some pictures for those of you who have not seen it, and for the younger people who are going, oh, 1991, that was ancient history, wasn't it? Yes, that was before, let's see, what was that before? I'm trying to think of something. Yeah, before 1992. Obviously, the quiz took a lot longer to answer on television, so there's a little bit of video rolling here. There we go. All right. Bob.
On 5 o'clock this evening, Hurricane Bob had come and gone, leaving behind a path of destruction. Very little structural damage, but Bob's 70-plus mile-an-hour winds were merciless on trees, snapping them into or uprooting them to land on houses, cars, or across streets, making most roads on the Cape impassable. Public Works employees, police, and firefighters in every Cape Town were out in force following the all-clear signal, beginning the cleanup. Residents wasted no time either. Raleigh Costa lost several wild cherry trees, and this one he planted as a seedling 35 years ago.
It's like losing a member of the family. We cultivated it, we kept it, and it was tough to lose.
Hurricane Bob also severely damaged pleasure craft. Here at Lewis Bay in Hyannis, between 15 and 20 boats of varying sizes were pushed onto the beach, anchors and all. At his peak, Bob was as mean as any hurricane of late, tossing boats, bending trees, pushing debris ashore. He is compared to Hurricane Carol of 1954, which killed more than 60 people and caused billions in damages. Lou Jaglibski, who survived that hurricane, believes this one is worse.
You worried? Well, I'm not too worried. God pull us here and take us away again. Only has to.
Fortunately, there are no reports of fatalities or serious injury. That could in part be due to residents heeding warnings. Most shelters were filled to capacity, and 50,000 tourists fled the Cape prior to Bob reaching the Commonwealth.
Planned on leaving this morning. I'm leaving a little earlier than we thought, and I don't know if we're going to make it.
So you're just getting out while you think you can?
Yes, we are.
I figure we'll just get over here and hope we don't get blown off the bridge.
There's an optimistic person. Yes? Yeah. Oh, right offhand, I believe it was a 3. I'd have to go look that up. In fact, give me just a second. Well, you know why? Because when we were kids, the snow was up to our armpits. We walked uphill both ways. The storms were always bigger when we were younger. Yeah, I know. Any storm, it didn't matter. You know, I remember as a kid, we lost power for like a month and a half. You know, at least those are the stories I tell my children anyway. So you guys have it very easy. You know, Hurricane Bob was very interesting. Category 2 storm. 11 people did die along the East Coast from it, most of those down to the south. It did $1.5 billion in damage. Now, this is a Category 2. It did $1.5 billion. Just to let you know, that's the 8th costliest hurricane ever recorded in the United States. That's a very, very expensive hurricane, and it was only a 2. You get the idea. We started getting a hurricane of 38 nowadays. I can hardly even imagine the total dollar amount of damage that's going to cause. That's why we really need to kind of be prepared. We need to, kind of look ahead to what's going on. Lead time on these storms, we have a good 5 days, usually with them. But everybody always wants to wait the last minute. We always look for Lou, too, by the way. He was the gentleman that was sitting there saying, I've weathered these storms before. As a news team, those are the people we look for. We want to find that guy who said, I'm going to ride this storm out, because they make a great soundbite, And so we always go looking for them, and they say, yeah, I remember the hurricane of, and then they, and we're always putting those people on. Now, it's bad because then the next guy comes along, you decide, well, I'd like to be on TV, so I'm going to hang out here and wait till the TV crew shows up. Because the TV crew's not very bright anyway, they don't know when to leave. So I'll stick around long enough, and then I can be on TV. Well, here's the problem. If you have been in, say, a Hurricane Bob, those people tend to be the ones who will hang around. They'll stick around for a while. The ones who have been through, say, a Hurricane Andrew, once there is any type of hurricane issued, a warning, a watch, whatever, they're the first ones out of town. They have been through it. They know what it's like, and they said, no, I'm out of here. And so those are the first ones that evacuate. The danger is that we get these smaller storms, then people start to think, oh, I can weather that. It's okay. One of the other things you see, my favorite thing is the little bit of duct tape that people put over the windows. Yeah, that's going to hold everything back, isn't it? don't mess with duct tape. Just put plywood up. It's the only way you're really going to do anything with it. So one of the other thing is that when you're getting prepared for this, you know, water, food, all those sorts of things, the thing people always said was put candles. You know, you got to have candles, right? You need to have candles in your survival kit because if the electricity goes out, you need candles. Don't do that. Don't put candles. In New England during Hurricane Bob, we had 3 people die. 2 of those died because of candles. And the reason is because houses catch on fire. Fire departments are busy doing other things. There's trees down, there's power lines down. They can't get to them. Save the candles for the romantic dinner, okay? You want a romantic dinner, candles are fine. Hurricanes, don't put candles in there. Use a flashlight. Get a flashlight. That's the way to go. So it's one of those things that we always used to say, you know, you're supposed to have a candle in your survival kit. Everybody has candles in there. They have no idea why the candles are there, but they put them in there. There's a similar thing that we used to do with tornadoes. It was open the windows on the southwest side of the house. The idea was equalize the pressure, all that kind of stuff. Then we found out that people who were opening the windows on the southwest side of the house, usually that's about the time the tornado was coming and they were catching the neighbor's tricycle at about 300 miles an hour. So we don't say that anymore. We say just leave the windows alone. And you know, when you start thinking about it logically, you go, gee, let's see, this thing is strong enough that it can lift trees out of the ground. Probably can open a window on its own, no problem. So don't mess with the windows. Don't put candles in there. Keep the candles for the dinner with your special loved one, but you know, don't put those in there. Now, we talked about hurricanes. Hurricanes really on the south coast and the Cape are they're probably the most dangerous. We also have another type of storm system, that's the nor'easter, which is one of my favorites. We got it there. Time for tonight's Wankum's weather quiz. It's called a nor'easter because A, it happens in the northeast. B, the wind comes from the northeast. C, it moves towards the northeast. Or D, nor'eastua means big storm in Latin. How many think A? How many think B? Very good. C? D? No D's? I worked a long time on that one. Somebody said, after I did that one, they said, you know Latin? I go, no. So, the correct answer is the winds come from the northeast. It's called the nor'easter. Nor'easter, by the way, was a term that comes, basically it's kind of credited to Maine lobstermen. And they, you know, because of the slang that they would use, and they would talk about the wind and they would say it was a nor'easter. Well, the rest of the country really never heard of the word nor'easter. Nor'easter was really a New England term. It was very local. Nobody really heard of it until the blizzard of '78. When the blizzard of '78 happened, people around the country, around the world were seeing these pictures, and they were saying, what was that? And so they said, well, it's a nor'easter. Huh? Okay, nor'easter. So nor'easter took, and it became a national word. It kind of became used by a lot of people. And there are still some people who are very upset with it because it is slang. You know, they say it should be northeaster. And it doesn't sound as cool. So we just stick with nor'easter. So that's where it comes from. That's the history of it. And really you have to kind of go back to the blizzard of '78, which was one of the real reasons it was that way. Now, last big, I think of as one of the big nor'easters, or one that I think that got probably a lot of press, we certainly have had quite a few of them, was 1991. Oh, okay. 1991. And in 1991, we called it the Halloween storm. It also was known as the no-name storm. Does anybody else know what its other name was? It didn't get it till later. What was it? Perfect Storm, exactly. It was the Perfect Storm. It was really after Sebastian Junger's book, and the movie came out. Another one of those great dramatic acting things. Great special effects, though, okay? But that was really kind of one of the bigger ones. Now, I did a story about the Perfect Storm, and I'm just going to play a little piece of it here. We'll see if it actually rolls at any particular time. But this was a story that I did a few years back, and I went and actually visited some of the characters. So if you are familiar with the book or anything, here's some of the real people that were in that one.
Situate Harbor is the picture of peace and calm. A few late-season boats rock gently on their moorings. But in 1991, after 4 days of howling wind and waves, the damage was everywhere. Nearby Peggotty Beach was all but destroyed. The destruction so complete that half of the homeowners never rebuilt. The federal government bought them out.
The waves actually went up over the roof, landed on the roof, and just left.
Joe Kelly remembers the neighborhood. A whole row of homes stood between these houses and the ocean. A few deserted pilings are about all that remain. He's learned from the experience.
You take no chances. When you're advised to leave, you should leave. And get while the getting's good. Because there is a point where you can't get out.
Up and down the coast, some just barely got out. In Chatham, in Hummerock, in Winthrop, in Revere. In Gloucester that night, Bill Smith just made it out of his mother's collapsing home.
All the stuff was like the front bathroom and the clothes in the front room are slid underneath this area here.
Pause there for a second. This is the house that was rebuilt on the same spot. There's this Bob Sheets, who is director of the National Hurricane Center, has a great line. He said, "People don't want to live near the ocean; they want to live in the ocean." I think this is a classic example of what he was talking about. But anyhow.
Rebuilt, but there's not much between it and the ocean.
Well, we all saw the damage along the coast from this storm. Most of us didn't know what was going on offshore, and that's where the real tragedy took place. Here in Gloucester, they knew about it, but the rest of the world was going to have to wait till 1997 when this book was published. And what we knew as the Halloween storm suddenly became known as the perfect storm. It recounts the tale of the 6 Gloucester fishermen lost at sea. To this day, family and friends still mourn their loss.
And after that, it was just a long wait.
Ethel Shatford's son Bobby was on the Andrea Gale. Even though she's a main character in the story, she's never read the book. It's just too painful. No one knows what it was like before the Andrea Gale slipped into the icy depths of the Atlantic. These are Coast Guard pictures of the rescue of a sailboat during the same storm. It was 700 miles west of the Andrea Gale in calmer water. One rescuer died in the attempt.
It's kind of hard. I try not to think of it too much. We always had a Halloween party for a few years. We just didn't do that, but we do it again now.
Ethel still tends bar at the Crow's Nest, a watering hole for fishermen and regulars. Fans of the book stop by to experience the local flavor. Some famous. Others still drop off flowers 7 years after her son was lost at sea, fulfilling the message engraved on a plaque dedicated to the crew of the Andrea Gale.
We've always known how dangerous it was. One of the other bartenders at work over there lost a brother 25 years ago. We've always known it. There's always been boats missing. But it's just something that you don't think it's going to be you. It's just, I don't know. It's just something I never thought of.
It was called the perfect storm because so many things meteorologically had to come together perfectly. A major nor'easter over Nova Scotia, combined with record high pressure over Canada, squeezing the atmosphere and increasing the wind. And along came Hurricane Grace, adding even more energy to this monster. Instead of heading east as most storms do, this one looped back toward the coast. At this point, it became a hurricane and could have been given a name, but no one did, and so it became known as the no-name storm. Forecasting has improved.
That's just a little bit of history about why it goes. Just some more beach scenes that I have here. I'm just going to go through there. Ethel has since passed away. She was wonderful. Made an incredibly great stew, by the way. The fishermen would bring in, pieces of fish that the seals had eaten, and they couldn't sell it, so she would make this stew that was really good. So she told me this story as I was eating it. This is what the seals didn't eat. But she was really, really wonderful person. It was a delight to meet her. And it was kind of an interesting group to meet at this place. It was just a typical watering hole for fishermen, and suddenly was put on the map. And so the tourists kept showing up at it, and it became a very, very interesting place. So that was from the perfect storm, or the no-name storm, or the Halloween storm. That's why people get confused. Which one was that one? And that's why it got all those names. Because of the time it happened, because it was a hurricane or should have been given a name and it wasn't, and then the third one is because it became known as the perfect storm. The reason it was called the perfect storm is because so many things had to come together just like that. Will it happen again? Probably. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it happens. Well, so far I've talked about big events, right? Hurricanes, nor'easters. Those are the things that get kind of meteorologically very exciting, right? Those are the kind of things that you tune in the newscast and you go, wow, look at that storm. He's got all these neat graphics. Well, many times some of the things that affect us are not necessarily that big. They happen to be much smaller, and they actually affect us a great deal. Time for the night's Wankum's weather quiz. When is frost most likely to form? Clear night, cloudy night, rainy night, or snowy night? How many think A? Yeah. How many think B? C? D?
Bam.
That's an audio glitch. The correct answer, you're right, clear night. Now, why did I bring that one up? No, stop, I say. Oh, that's right, I got to push this button. I keep going to this one, and it's actually over on this one. Why do I bring up a question about frost? I mean, we're talking about big storms here. Why? Well, because more people get injured by frost or killed by frost in Massachusetts than they do from hurricanes and from nor'easters. Why? It's because of black ice. It's because of the ice on the roads. Now, I always tell this to people, especially if you have young people. I have a 16-year-old son, okay? So I now have him driving, which is probably one of the more scary things that you've ever been exposed to. I do not let him drive at nights when there is frost out. And he goes, Dad, what, you know the story. Okay, if you have teenagers, you know how they're going to yell back at you for that one. But I really, really try to caution young people. Be careful. Be really careful. You can't tell it's out there. Your driving instincts are much less than what they will be in a few years. It's just very difficult to see. You don't know it's there. We had a very close family friend of ours whose son was killed in a car accident because of black ice. And so it's one of those things that I really try to push onto people. And I don't mean to be a downer or anything like that. I just want people to be aware of it, to pass it around and say, there is that chance of frost in it. Because when does it happen? It happens on a clear night. And you think, gee, clear night, what can go wrong? Well, you're better off driving in a blizzard sometimes, because at least the snow you can see. The black ice oftentimes you can't see. So I just put that in there. If you have some young people at home, tell them to slow down, okay? Especially on those nights when there's any kind of ice going on out there. So, by the way, black ice is an interesting thing that they're doing a lot of studies on it. I mean, as soon as you find out that there is something like that going on, they've actually developed these bridges. And Erie, Pennsylvania has the first one. Why Erie, Pennsylvania? I have no idea. But what this bridge does is it actually senses when black ice forms. By the way, ice will form on a bridge faster because the cold air can circulate underneath of it. So it cools off faster, and so you get ice that forms on top of it, so you get the black ice. It's called black ice. It's not black. It's just because you can't see it, and the asphalt is black, and so that's where it gets its name from. So anyhow, they have this bridge in Erie, Pennsylvania. What it does, it senses when there's ice on it, and that's pretty neat in itself. But the second thing is it has little sprinklers that come up, and it de-ices the bridge. So it's like an automatic de-icer. And they're working on this as a concept that may be into future consideration. Now, they thought about putting it in the Big Dig, but then they figured another $4 or $5 billion wouldn't go over really well. So they left it out. But it was very, very interesting. They got the Big Dig open this year. But one of the big problems they had was such a cold winter, and there was so much moisture inside the tunnel. They had a lot of ice inside the tunnel. I mean, it was like you were driving in New Hampshire with those big ice flows off the side of the mountains. That was like inside of the tunnels. It was unbelievable to see it going on. And think we had to pay extra to get that. So those are some of the things that are happening in terms of ways that we'll be able to find out what's going on. Maybe sensors that will be able to do it, ways that we can prevent it from happening, and hopefully we won't have any more of those kind of tragedies. Now, time for tonight's Wankum's weather quiz. All right, how much snow did you shovel? This is a math question, by the way. How much snow did you shovel if your driveway is 25 feet long by 10 feet wide? Yeah, a fairly long driveway, but not that terribly long. All right, so how many? 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds, or 5,000 pounds? How many think A? What's that? Oh! That would probably be very important, wouldn't it, at this point? Let's see. How much did I put? Oh, yes, I put 2 feet of snow down. Yep, I put 2 feet of snow down. I'll explain why I put down 2. 2 feet of snow. It's kind of nice dimensionally. 2 feet of snow, 25 feet long, 10 feet wide. 500 pounds? Anybody? 1,000 pounds. There we go. 2,000 pounds. 5,000 pounds. Oh, there's some people that know their back very well. 5,000 pounds. That's how much snow you're shoveling. 5,000 pounds. Now, if I told you this afternoon to go out and lift 5,000 pounds, a couple of trucks, an elephant or something like that, no, you wouldn't do it. But you'll take that shovel and you'll go out and do the same thing in your driveway. That's why we have so many heart attacks. True story. I shoveled my snow for years. I have a 16-year-old son. We're going to shovel this thing. I have a driveway which is 25 feet long, 10 feet wide, which is the reason I did this one. I got a snowblower last winter. It was the first time I ever did. Now this snowblower, it's the Tim Allen syndrome, okay? It's got 12 horsepower. It's got a headlight on it. It's got heated handles. I mean, this thing, it's got tank tracks. It will go up walls, okay? If the snow is 12 feet, it would go straight up it and come right down it. I mean, this is an amazing piece of machinery. Now, I used to have to go out there with my son and I would shovel. And my back would hurt, for a couple of weeks. You know how it is, right? Now I have the snowblower. I don't do any shoveling. My son wants to play with the snowblower. He's doing the neighbors, he's doing the street, and what's beautiful about this is I had a friend of mine tell me, he said, don't get a snowblower unless you can hit your neighbor's house with it, okay? Because you want to be able to clean yours and throw it all the way over the top, just to make it. So if you haven't got a snowblower, you need to get one because it's the best investment you'll ever get, especially if you have teenage sons, okay? Because you'll never get to play with it. They'll just go out and do it. They go out 2-3 times during a snowstorm with all the horsepower, and they get to blow the snow all over. So, save your back, get a snowblower. And by the way, as soon as I did that, the hardware store called everybody in town and said, hey, guess what? The weatherman's buying a snowblower. They sold them all out. So it worked pretty good for them, I guess. In an average year, we get about 105 snow-producing systems in the United States. I think some years that every one of those is in New England. It is the most challenging part of forecasting for a weathercaster, is forecasting snow. Rain's pretty easy, temperatures relatively easy, but now you have the combination. And then we throw in the ocean. And depending on the time of the year, snow is the most difficult thing to forecast. It is the most challenging, and it is the one, as an audience, that you want to know the most. I mean, it is really, it's the one that keeps me awake at night. And then I'm very serious because if I issue a forecast and then I go home, I'm up 2-3 times at night looking through, out the window, see if it's snowing. Oh, it's not snowing yet. Okay. It's got to be snowing pretty soon. Oh, it's not snowing. Oh, that's the radio station calling, wondering where the snow is. Okay. Oh, the paper's calling. They want a quote. Okay. Remember I said I lived in Virginia? Virginia doesn't get that much snow very often. They do get some big storms every once in a while, but they don't get it that often. Well, one night we had a big storm coming. Big storm. It was going to snow, I don't know, 3,000 feet. That's what it seemed like. But it was going to snow. It was going to snow maybe probably 6 inches. So it was going to snow 6 inches. So everybody is going, all go to a particular grocery store. It's called U-Crops down there. And they go to U-Crops, and everybody buys bread and toilet paper, okay? I have no idea why, but they do it, okay? And it's a social event. You just have to do it. It doesn't matter if you don't need bread and toilet paper. You just have to go to U-Crops and be seen buying toilet paper and bread because it's the fashionable thing to do during a snowstorm. So everybody goes there, and Richmond is kind of a dress-up city, So, I mean, everybody puts on their finest, I mean, you're people with ties, and they're buying toilet paper, It's a wonderful scene, and nobody outside, everybody in Richmond thinks it's just normal, If you came in from the outside, looked at it, you'd go, what is going on here? But it is the social event of the season whenever snow is in the forecast to go buy your bread and toilet paper at U-Crops. Well, we issue this forecast, right? It's going to snow. It's going to snow more than it has probably snowed in a decade there. So they said, well, first thing, of course, city government closes. Yeah, we're going to close, okay? So no problem, okay, so they close. The state government, we're closed. School closes, okay? There's no school tomorrow. Keep in mind, not a flake of snow has fallen yet, okay? Not a flake of snow. Everybody's at U-Crops, but nobody has seen a flake of snow. All right, so what happens? You guessed it, the worst nightmare you can ever have as a meteorologist. You wake up in the morning, and there's like one flake falling, and that's it. As that one flake is falling, you're seeing your entire career pass right before your eyes. No snow. There was no snow that day. The kids were out of school. There was no government. It was a wonderful holiday, and of course, people had more bread and toilet paper than they ever knew what to do with. So it is the most challenging thing that we do in terms of forecasting. Boston, New England is probably the Super Bowl for forecasting. There are no slouches in Boston. I know all the meteorologists there. We're friends. We compete. And I will tell you that they're all very good. You won't last in this area very long unless you know how to do snow. And I can always tell the people who have never done snow in New England. We were talking about this earlier. We'll send the new reporters. You always send the new reporters to places you would not go. All right. So what you do is you say, all right, where's the waves going to be the best? Where's the beach going to be crashing through? And so you send them there. Now, it might not be that big a storm, but they think it's the worst thing that ever happened. It's the white Armageddon. And so they're all out there, and you send them out there. What you need at that point is a Shelby Scott. And those of you who don't remember, Shelby Scott was on BZ for years. And if Shelby didn't have her hat on, there was nothing, okay? So, that's what you really need. And I can remember Shelby even sitting there saying, this is nothing. In the meantime, they'd go to another reporter and they would say, this is the worst. They have the goggles on. This is the worst thing we've ever seen. And Shelby would go, yeah, right. So I mean, those are the things. That's why I say the forecasting here is very good. You're actually kind of, I know you're probably saying, well, the forecasts aren't that good. But They really are. If you go to some other places in the United States and you see what they kind of come up with for snow forecasts, it's really pretty scary sometimes. And in fact, when I left, they were saying, can you please just give us your forecast, nothing else. You can leave, but we want you to stay and tell us what's going on with it. So, I mean, the forecasters here are very, very good. We also have some of the most detailed weather records. People kept weather records for hundreds of years. They started when they were your age. Yep, they started writing weather records down. Yeah, it rained today. Yeah, and then you get a little more detail. We have these wonderful, wonderful records that are hundreds of years old that we can actually go back. And it's kind of funny, they didn't know what was going on, but now we can meteorologically understand what was taking place. So those are just some of the things that are happening. Oh, just so you don't forget, you know, it's such a beautiful spring day. Yeah, we already know the answer to that one. This is where we put the commercials in now. So don't forget, this is what it looks like. This happens to be the President's Day storm, February 18th, 2003. Most snow ever recorded in 24 hours in Boston. 27.5 inches. Oh, don't you love it? Yes, we even put the dramatic music with it because it was so much fun. That was an interesting storm, by the way, because, you know, I said it's 27.5 inches, record amount. Well, there's a dispute as to how we measure snow. Now, here's the way you're supposed to measure snow. You put a board out on the ground. By the way, it's called a snowboard. It is actually called that, and it was called a snowboard long before, you know, the shredders did the thing on the slopes. It's called a snowboard. You put a snowboard out sometime in the fall, which for us is what, August? No, we put a snowboard out. Then what you do is when it snows, you wait 6 hours, you measure it, you brush it off, and then you come back and you measure it in 6 hours. Every 6 hours you measure it. Now the idea being is because if you measure it in less time, it will compress, you know, or more time. So the whole idea was every 6 hours you measure it. Now that's the way we have done it since about the late 70s. In the 40s, they didn't. They waited until the snow was finished, went out and measured it. That's why there are some who still dispute and say the late 40s actually had more snow than what we did. Remember the 93, 94 winter, and then there was the 95, 96 winter, which were horrible winters, and we established 2 records in those years. That's because we were measuring the 6-inch one and then sweeping it off. In the old days, they waited till the storm was over. So there is some conflict as to what those records are. Now, this one is really in dispute because the person who was out at the airport, Logan Airport, which is where they took the official reading from, was actually going out every 3 hours and doing this and measuring it. So it really kind of got stacked up a little bit faster. But you can't, because we went back and looked at radar, trust me, we have entire symposiums devoted to how that snow was measured in that storm. Sounds like a lot of fun, right? Yeah. Oh, forget about those wild parties. You know, you get a bunch of meteorologists go, yeah, well, the snowboard said, and we talk about snowfall totals. So that's one of the things that's being disputed as to whether that was actually an official record. It goes down as an official record, but has a big asterisk next to it. Sort of like a Red Sox season. So it is something that we continue to watch. And we try to teach people how they're supposed to measure them because everybody, I'll tell you a story. Can't repeat this one, okay? We had a weather watcher who comes from a town which shall go nameless, which starts with an S, but it's up north. Anyhow, he would call in with the snowfall totals. And he would always call in, and he would always make it a little bit more than anybody else's, you know? Because he wanted to get his town on the air, okay? He wanted to get his town on the map. And so, you know, if everybody else had 10, he had 10.5, you know? And he would call around to find out what everybody had first before he called in, so he would have 10.5. Well, we kind of kept seeing this a lot. So what happened was, clandestine operation, what they did was the National Weather Service actually sent someone up to his street during a snowstorm with a cell phone. They're sitting on the end of his street. As soon as he called in with it, they put a ruler in to measure what they had there. He was padding it. They had official evidence for it now, and so his numbers were no longer able to be used. So, but it's a true story. That's how serious we are about measuring snow. Yeah. Yes? There's the problem. How do we measure with wind blowing? It's near impossible. What we try to do is you try to find 4 places that are not drifted over, and you measure in those 4 places and average them out. But it's very, very difficult. I mean, that's why you can go back to blizzard of '78 or any of those storms, and there's dispute as to how much snow actually fell. Even the April Fool's Day storm, that was also disputed. There was some total difference there because people weren't going out every 6 hours because it was so cold and wet and everything out. So the goal is to measure it that way. Speaking of measuring, in weather, we're so detailed. It snowed 10.37 inches of snow. The only thing we're not accurate in is the size of hail. Have you ever noticed hail? Hail is the thing that we go, it was the size of peas. It was the size of golf balls. It was the size of softballs. We had basketball size hail. Whatever it is. We use these sporting events. And if you ever see hail, it never, in fact, listening to them on TV when I was a child, I always used to think, oh, perfect softballs out there with the hail. No, they're big chunks of ice, and people do that. It's the one thing we don't really measure that detailed or that accurately. But otherwise, everything else we try to reduce it to as much as we can. And actually, the thing that we're most interested in is the water content, because for spring runoff and things. So we actually melt the snow down to see what's going on. We've got a few minutes here. I'd like to open up for some questions. Some questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes, yes.
How can you predict from year to year what will happen on a certain week or day?
You mean like the Farmer's Almanac does with the a trend? A trend, or are you looking like the Farmer's Almanac, which does like a day-to-day? Yes, yes. Well, you bribe us, you see, and then we just make a few phone calls and the weather turns out perfect. So, yeah, and depending on how far away it is the more we charge. The boat show, okay. Well, you really can't. In meteorology, what we do is we consider 10 days to be our sort of functional period. We get some trends that go out a couple of weeks, but 10 days is about the best we can go. There are those who would dispute that we can do 10 days. When the first 5-day forecast started showing up, the Chamber of Commerce from a particular Cape Cod city called all the weather people down to the Cape for an enjoyable weekend to discuss that we shouldn't be issuing 5-day forecasts, because if you say it's going to rain on Saturday and it's only Monday, then we get cancellations, and the economics involved with it are unbelievable. Most places are going to a 7-day forecast just because we think in 7 days. And really, by day 6 or day 7, you're going to pick up major storms. You're not going to be able to pick up detailed storms, but you're going to get trends. It's warming up, it's cooling down, whatever. Beyond 10 days, we start to go trends. Beyond, say, 6 months, we're really going more climatically. So you really can't get a forecast. Now, the Farmer's Almanac does issue pretty much a daily forecast a year in advance. Now, from a meteorological, scientific standpoint, that was just trash. We've actually learned that what they use is a little bit of sunspot activity, and there is some validity to it. Very, very minor, though, okay? I think even the Farmer's Almanac will say they're right 51% of the time. Flipping a coin, by the way, is 50% of the time. So they got an accuracy of 51%. So they base it on sunspots. So I was actually kind of impressed to find out they actually did that. And we are actually starting to see some long-term trends that we can deal with it there. However, here's the problem. I will get the forecast right 362 days of the year, okay? But I miss it a couple of days, okay? Once or twice. You remember the time I missed it once or twice, right? I get the phone calls, like the emails, I get the letters, everything like that. Farmer's Almanac misses it 364 days a year. One day they get it right. What happens? The newspaper calls them, whoa, did you see this? The Farmer's Almanac said that. Of course, never mentioning the fact that they said it was going to be 95 the week before. But they've got that one. So I haven't figured out how this credibility thing works. I guess I have to be around for a couple of hundred years. But it's one of those things that just kind of like baffles you, but you try. And it's a lot of fun. I read the thing, too, just kind of out of curiosity more than anything. Most of the time you can't understand it because it's kind of written in this cryptic language. They had a very interesting one. I'm trying to remember the year. I think it was 1812. They actually issued it, and it said there would be snow in July. It was a misprint, and so they tried to get all of them back. There weren't that many at that time, but they were trying to get them all back. What happened was there was a large volcano, which actually did erupt, and what it did was it was called the year without a summer because it was very cold in New England. We had frost. We had snow. We had snow in July. The thing was right, but they brought all of them back. So it's a really rare copy if you ever can find one of those things. But it is a fascinating study in our psychology more than anything as to why that one gets the credit when it's right, but we'll get it when it's wrong. But that's okay. As long as you're watching, we don't care. Yes, question?
What weather instruments do you depend upon for prediction?
Computers. Yeah, I mean, I say that not even really almost jokingly, but I mean, we rely, obviously, temperature, humidity, all those things, winds, pressure, all of that is factored into it. But without the computer, we could not do modern forecasting. To get a map, if you came and visited me at the station, I have weather maps, and they print out about size like this. I think that now to advance a weather map 24 hours. In other words, take a picture of what it is now in the atmosphere, and 24 hours later kick the map out, is about 11 billion calculations. You know, you could just never do that. In fact, the very early computer models back in the early 60s when they first came out, it would actually take them 24 hours to produce a map for 24 hours. In other words, you put all this stuff in and you got a map out that should show you exactly what's going on right now. And it didn't work that way, so they went back to the drawing board. But the computers that we use now are so incredible, and with the amount of information that can come through. We have forecasting models that we use. We actually have one that we're developing at our own station right now, in our own office, where we're taking bits and pieces from other forecast models and we're putting into it. One of the problems that we have with forecast models is that they tend to introduce climate, and we're trying to create a model that doesn't introduce climate. So we will pick up the extremes. And so it's kind of an interesting study that we're working on. But really, modern forecasting without the computer, we just couldn't do it. There's just no way to do it. In fact, really one of the lost art forms is looking at the clouds and really understanding what the clouds are. There's actually a big push in the American Meteorological Society to have people learn it. Now, I took a class on clouds that was probably maybe a couple of hours, you know, in one of my freshman level classes. It just is not taught anymore. In fact, at one time there was a television station in San Francisco that hired he was a town gardener, is what he was. He was a city gardener. He was used to being outside in the elements all the time. They actually hired them on the weather staff because he could understand what was going on, and it's such a microclimate, what was happening in San Francisco with the fog and the breeze and the upwelling and things like that. So it is a lost art form that, you know, I have actually kind of tried to learn a little bit more of it. You know, look at the clouds and see what's going to happen, because they will tell you what's going to happen with the weather, and they're fascinating to watch. And that's what I tell my wife I'm doing every time I go sailing. I'm actually doing research, dear. Yes?
You mentioned how difficult it was to predict the snow in New England. I just wondered what other factors make it just difficult. They talk about, wait a minute, the weather will change.
Yes.
I just wondered what factors.
Why New England is? Why New England? Because we have so many different air masses coming at us. For example, if you go to the Central Plains, you would have like a cold air mass from Canada. You can watch it coming down. You have warm air surging up from the south, the humidity coming that way. Desert Southwest, whatever. What happens in New England is we have all those elements coming together, and they're coming at us from all different directions, plus that ocean effect. Plus we have storms. Once those storms get out over the ocean, especially hitting the Gulf Stream and things like that, they will do what we call a bomb. They'll bomb out. They just become monster storms. And so they feed upon the ocean. So you have all of those things being introduced to there, plus the temperature of the ocean, depending on the time of the year. So there's so many things going on. It's why the home of the world's worst weather, top of Mount Washington, New Hampshire. One of the reasons it is that way is because of that compression of air that was moving through there. And that's why they have the strongest winds ever recorded. So I mean, people like to say wherever they live, oh, we have the most interesting, the most difficult forecasting. We really do. And if anybody from San Diego ever says, yeah, we've got the toughest weather to forecast, forget it. I had a friend who worked out there for 6 months, left. He said there's no weather. Question, yes?
I went for a walk near a little pond at Schumann Reservation. And as I walked along this path on the edge of this pond, a bunch of leaves started twirling.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it. And then a mini tornado went across the water.
Uh-huh.
The water rose up about that high. And I wondered, what made that happen?
That's a dust devil. It's the term we use. They actually,
Dust there, of course.
No. What they did was the early research.
How does that happen?
Well, it's actually, when they first started studying tornadoes, it was very difficult, obviously, because they're dangerous and nobody knew what to do. They actually started studying the dust devils, because the dust devils are fairly common in areas, especially in the desert Southwest. What you were seeing is a heating of the earth. And as the earth heated, it probably was a sunny day when you were out when this happened.
Actually, no, it was
That's interesting. You've got, oh, you just threw my theory right out the window. Usually what happens is the ground heats up in a particular area, and as those currents are rising, then you get a spinning motion that goes on, and then it can actually kind of develop into itself. The other thing you might have happen is if it was a cloudy day, you were near a pond though, if you were near a roadway sometimes, like a big truck going by, will actually set that spinning motion into effect, and then you'll get that rotation going on as well. So I'm not really sure what was going on. You may have been just enough topography where there was a strong breeze that came through. Usually happens on a day when the wind is very quiet, so that it doesn't stir anything up, and then that heating takes place. And that's really where they did some of the early research on that. Fujita, Dr. Theodore Fujita was on.
the water went up about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a water spout is kind of a distant cousin of a tornado. It's more in the principle of that. So they're a little bit different. They're a little safer than a tornado is to study. But yeah, the early research on tornadoes was actually done with those things. Sure. Another question at all? Yes.
You mentioned the computer, so you
Yes.
basically, it's not really scientific the way you forecast the weather. It's a lot of statistical parameters there involved.
Yes. I mean, what we do is think of it in terms of a forecast as we try to figure out what's happening in the upper atmosphere and then bring it down to the surface. And that's where we get our features. We're very good at forecasting large-scale weather patterns above the surface. Bringing those elements down to the Earth is a little more complex. I think of the forecast, and what we do is we sort of get these computer models. And think of it as a big lump of clay that's dropped on my desk every afternoon. Now, what I do with this lump of clay is I shape it, I mold it, I create this beautiful forecast out of it. Sometimes, however, as we've all seen in our craft classes, the clay doesn't do what we wanted to do, and you have this mess, okay? So every once in a while that happens. Not very often, but usually I create this beautiful vase. And so I really rely a great deal on those computer models to give me guidance. In fact, a lot of times we'll call them computer guidance. And then what I do is I remember, okay, what happened the last time this happened? There's a great deal of memory that goes on. You know, what happened? How did that storm behave? What were its characteristics? How will it affect this area, that area? And so I take that information, and that's where the human element comes into it. More and more computers are starting to take in some of the stuff that we know. They're trying to figure out ways to put it in there. And those are ways that we're going to make forecasting better and better and better all the time. But it still relies a great deal on how much you can remember. What happened? What happened last time the storm happened? But pressure is a very, very important part of it. Yes? What's that? Hindcasting? And like cover my hind? Or Oh, yes, absolutely. A great deal of that is what you do when you're doing research or when you're studying meteorology is you go back over past storms, take a look at them, see what they do, figure out what the forecast was, and then go back and see what reality really was, and see where your holes were, where the problem came into them. Yes? Oh, my goodness, Doppler radar. Isn't it the greatest thing that we ever invented? Doppler radar, by the way, Doppler's been around forever, okay? Charles Doppler, I think 1850s, that's where it comes from. All it does is, have you ever been picked up for speeding, by the way? No. Do you know anyone who's ever been picked up by speeding? Okay, all right. They have experienced Doppler radar up close and personal. What you're doing is, with Doppler radar, is you're measuring how fast, instead of a car coming at you, you're measuring how fast a raindrop's coming at you, or a raindrop's going away. You're just seeing which way the raindrops are moving. So if you have a bunch of raindrops going this way, and a bunch of raindrops going that way, you've got this area in between where you're going to look for rotation, and that's where a tornado may be forming. That's the whole point of it. Well, TV stations have decided to jump on the Doppler bandwagon. So I've got the Doppler 10,000. That's nothing. I got the Doppler 12,000. You know, so it's a buzzword that people are using right now. All it really is doing is, in fact, really during World War II when radar was being developed, and they were really using a lot of it, they were trying to get rid of it because it was they were trying to get the Doppler shift out. A good example of what the Doppler shift is that if you hear a train coming at you, you know how it goes, there's that sound, or a car comes at you. What's happening is the sound waves are being compressed, and then they're passed, okay? So you're actually measuring the speed of the raindrop using that same principle. You're measuring the raindrops to see which direction they're moving. Most of the time, 98% of the time, the radar that you see on TV is not showing the Doppler. It's basically showing reflectivity. It's not showing motion within the storm. But if we paid all this money, we're going to call it Doppler. So I've seen double Doppler. I've seen Doppler 12,000. I've seen all these things. I've seen people who don't even have Doppler radar call it Doppler. You know, because it's like, wow, that's a neat word. We'll use that. So I'm trying to, in fact, at our station, they were trying to figure out what's a word that we can use that really sounds neat, that we can use as, you know, microcasting. We don't know what it means, but wow, it sounds cool. So we might use that one. So yes. Yes. Central computer models really come out of Washington, D.C. There are several of them, depending on your count, 5. And there are European ones, there's Canadian ones, there's different countries that do them. We have access to all of those. And then also at our station, we're actually creating our own computer model. which we just got some new computer systems in. They really spent a lot of money on hardware. Our philosophy as a station is a lot of people are using radar as like their big selling point, and so they're spending a lot of money. It's not cheap to put a radar up. You can figure about $500,000 to put a radar system up anymore, just because of the permitting process and everything. But all radar can really do is show you what's happening about 3 minutes ago, you know, and then older. And what we've decided to do is we're trying to put our money into forecasting and try to get better and better forecasts. And one of the things that we were able to do this winter, and it wasn't a very good winter because we didn't have that much snow, is we're able to actually start forecasting for specific cities how much snow is going to fall. Because you may not really care how much snow is going to fall in Boston. You might be more interested in how much snow is going to fall in Falmouth or wherever. And we can actually start to do that. And it was very exciting. We got to run it on a couple of storms. It did really, really well. I was very, very pleased with it. Has some cold bias to it right now. We're still tweaking with it, trying to get it to work. But hopefully it's something you'll get to see more of. You know, I haven't drawn an isobar since when I was in college. I had to. When I was in college, they would give you a whole list of all these cities, and they would give you the pressure, and you had to plot them all on a national map, and then you had to draw your isobars, and it took you a week to put this surface map together. You know, now it's like boom, I click a button and it's up there on the computer. But yeah, were you in the military at all? I run into a lot of military guys who had to draw isobars, and they were really quite good at it. Oh yes, oh yeah. I remember one time I put isobars up on a map, and the sports guy came to me and said, "Will that chip the paint on my car?" You know, so I want to, you know, I'm kind of running long on time here. I will be happy to stay and answer questions so I can talk about weather for as long as you want to. But I really want to thank you very much for coming here and to share a little bit about what I do and get a chance to experience a little bit about it. And I hope you get a chance to watch, and you'll see what we do on Thursday night. So thank you very, very much for inviting me today. Oh, I get gifts. Oh, thank you.
For you to wear this on the weather tonight.
Oh, let me see what we have here before I say yes or no. Oh, no, makeup will say it'll mess my hair up. But I will definitely show it. How's that? Okay. Thank you very much.